So the first question that I have for you is right now, what do you think are the biggest challenges in psychological science? What is it that you think about going into academia, thinking about academia, doing a PhD? Now that you're conducting science, what are some of the biggest challenges that you think are that you're facing, that the community is facing? Any thoughts? Please, yes.
The ability to replicate old studies with small sample size.
So, for example, what?
So, for example, like some of the studies back then used the sample size was less than 10, and some of them even included the authors themselves. So, like now they're trying to replicate some of the older studies without the author, like much bigger sample size.
Yeah. Why is this a challenge? What is it trying to address? What is the problem?
Because, sometimes, like if the studies shows the results that we assume they're right, and then we just base off that, but they're actually not right, and we have to make sure the building blocks are solid before we build anything on top of it.
Yeah, thank you very much. So a really good point. I'm curious, how many of you have done a thesis before starting your advanced studies in the undergraduate? Some of you have, yeah. Have you built your work on previous studies and found that maybe it didn't go according to plan? Some of you have, yes. So every year when I attend as a second examiner, the undergraduates and the MSc, undergraduates and masters, and I see their plans. So we do presentations and they ask me to give some advice. And typically the advice that I see is that many times they go for these things that were published a long time ago based on very small samples, and they just assume that this will work out. And then they take the next step. Usually they also take a very big step forward, just assuming all the literature is there, all the literature is solid, therefore I can build the next step. I can do like a moderator, I can do something else. And then at the end of the year, when I see the actual thesis being submitted, I see that the students are very disheartened by the fact that nothing worked, nothing came out significant. There's lots of issues of why this may happen. We also, in undergraduate and MSc thesis, run very small samples. So there's an issue of power. We'll talk about power and what that actually means. But it also might mean that something in the literature that they saw perhaps even has thousands of citations, thousands of studies on something that seems to fail to replicate. So there is something that some people have called the reproducibility replication crisis. So we'll talk a little bit about that in the second half of the session today. But that is a very good crisis that we need to talk about. Something with replicability is not working as expected, which one of the reasons perhaps is that this has been based on very, very small samples. Thank you. Any other challenges that you're thinking about? What worries you as you conduct research, MPhil, PhD? What kind of challenges do you see? Please.
I would say more so about how studies are published. Like if they don't have significant findings, they're usually not gone through the process of being published, and therefore whatever we see and cite is perhaps not representative of the actual phenomenon that occurs, but rather the context in which the data was collected.
Perfect. Do you know the term for this umbrella term for this?
No.
Okay, good. So we definitely have a publication bias. So what it is that we published actually does not reflect the reality of everything that we've done in science and in research. So definitely we have this obsession with the p-value lower than 0.05. If you can't get the p-value to get below 0.05, the chances of you publishing something, especially in the top journals, is very, very small. What is the problem with this? Many, many problems with this. I think this is one of the biggest challenges that we have, and also related to some of the things with the replication crisis. So we'll talk about what is the problem with this publication bias and why it's so problematic for science and what it is that we do. Good, thank you. So two very big problems. Anything else on your mind? Yes, please.
It's hard to find reliable and valid measures for a lot of things in psychology. I think because like we're thinking of so many new things to study in psychology.
Yeah.
We have things for depression, we have things for anxiety, but how about like loneliness or just more abstract concepts in psychology that we might not have the tools that we need right now.
So you see this as more of an issue of measurement, of validity, of generalizability, or we just haven't covered everything?
Yeah, all of that.
All of the above.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mostly viability.
Yeah. So we have a lot of issues with methods, also when regarding to scales and measures that we use to measure all sorts of things like individual differences. So some people are talking about measurement crisis. Perhaps we have a problem with validity. So one of the big things that some people emphasize, especially I just came out from a Zoom session that talked about open science in Asia. It did not go the way that I expected because open science is often confused with what? Open access. So we're talking a lot more about open access, which is another huge problem that we'll talk about. I was hoping that they'll talk about open science, but one of the big problems that people like us here in this region of the world worry about is that everything is very, very weird up there. So what is weird? Western, educated, industrialized, rich and democratic, right? Some people changed the Western to white, which I think is fair enough. So we don't have representation for all sorts of things that perhaps we care about in this region, right? So we measure a lot of things that the West really cares about. But when we try to look at this here, we don't really know, does this really generalize? Do people really understand? So I'll just give you an example. In my PhD, which was not too far away from here in a different university in Hong Kong, I did my PhD on the belief in free will, which free will is already a very abstract concept. How do you translate this to Chinese? I've heard all sorts of, when we do back translations, when I see what comes back, I'm like, that's not what we call free will. This is not how we regard free will. So a lot of issues with measurement that we need to take into consideration. So that's fair enough. So before I show you, actually, I don't know. Okay, this did not go as expected as well. But given these three major issues, and assuming that we're not doing the t-test ANOVA regression course, what is it that you hope to get from this course? I will share with you my vision for this course, but given your interest and what it is that you hope to get from this, I can make adjustments so we can go into more of your directions or what it is that you're expecting. So what are your hopes when you think about this course? What kind of training do you think that you need? Please, yes.
I hope I will get used to speaking up. Yeah, this is what I think I need to be trained.
Okay, a course where you can speak up.
Yeah.
Terrific. You've already done a good job starting this out. What can I do in order to get you to speak up more?
To be honest, I think the course in the last 10 minutes, I think the vibe is very open and friendly, and
okay,
and that's what I think you need to do only. Yeah.
Okay, terrific. So more engagement, more discussion, asking you for your opinion, perhaps reflecting, building up on that. Great, terrific, thank you. Anything else? Even not this course, from a PhD program, MPhil program here at HKU, from a psychology department, you can spend this time, 3 hours every week, sitting in the lab, punching the keyboard, running R, and writing manuscripts. Why be here? What value can I give you? How can I make sure that I'm effective?
I think being able to establish good, and by good, probably I mean proper research practices that are most compatible with open science.
Okay, very good. So talking about what is it that we do in the process and to make sure that this adheres to the best practices of the evolving open science direction. Terrific. Anything else that you would like for us to focus on? Yeah, statistical methods in what sense? Can you elaborate a little bit? Cognitive psychology.
For example, those models are frequently using the social psychology versus those. Yeah, well, I just want to like mix everything up
to get exposed to new statistical methods that perhaps come from different domain, and you can apply this in your own research. So getting to know a wider array of tools that you can use in order to do better research. Okay, terrific. Anything else on your mind? Something that you would like me to focus on?
I think going off what imaging said, I think the open science like aspect, because it's so new and it's like what are the pros and cons and what's about, because I think the thing that's most interesting to me is what if you register a study but it goes to a different direction as you planned, and what do you do from there? Yeah, so we will face many obstacles and challenges, and then we will need to learn how to deal with those and overcome those in order to meet the expectations, the growing expectations from implementing open science. It's so new. We have so many questions. We don't know what we've heard. Maybe open science is a thing. We've heard of all these 3 challenges and maybe many more, but we're not sure what do these mean, and when I face them, how do I overcome them? Yeah, very good. I just want to take one thing that you said, which is, I think, very important. There is a podcast. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I don't know if you do, but that's a good way to get through the MTR. And sometimes I hike, so I listen to this, and I listen to audiobooks. There's a guy called Daniel Lakens. Have you heard of him? Daniel Lakens, yeah. So Daniel Lakens has a podcast, which I cannot pronounce, Nullius in Verba. And so they do amazing things. They do very open kind of discussions about everything that goes on in research. And one of the things that they do before every episode, they read from a book. So it's almost like an audiobook where Daniel Lakens or the co-host read from the literature. So this week, they read Barber, 1976, Pitfalls in Human Research, 10 Pivotal Points. When I listened to this, I was devastated because all the issues that we're going to discuss here now with open science have been identified in 1976, and nobody ever did anything about those. So as they go through the 10 pitfalls, it's just like blows my mind. It's like all the issues that we just talked about, the 3 issues and many more that we're dealing with open science, have been identified 50 years ago. So of course, taking these is cherry picking. So you take from thousands of articles that have been published before and say, somebody said that a long time ago, therefore we missed it. Of course, we can miss some stuff, but it feels like 50 years has gone past and we haven't really done much about it. So some of the issues that we're going to talk about, especially some of the practices that we'll talk about, are definitely new, but the issues go as far as science. And actually this paper by Barber cites many of the issues that have been identified. Questionable research practices, p-hacking, publication bias have been identified in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, but we haven't done much about them. Even at HKU, we don't talk about these things enough. We focus on how to run t-test and ANOVA, where we should really be talking to you about these issues in science and how to overcome them. So thank you for pitching in and sharing a little bit. So going back to the presentation, I want to also align expectations that everything that we do in this session is going to be open. So I take open science to the very extreme. It's not just about opening up our research, but it's also opening up everything that I teach. So actually the way that I got to this presentation, I did not copy anything with me. I Googled myself. So I did this. I'll
do the same with you. So that's my name, Gilad Feldman, and then I wrote teaching, OSF, and then I went here to the OSF. So everything that I ever taught is open on the OSF. On the right side, you can see all the courses, including this course, so 6010. And then if you open this over here, you'll see that you'll have all of the tutorials from previous years already set over there. So how to use Slack, how to do a team contract, and our assessment, effect size, Qualtrics, etc. But also there's the lectures, and the slides for this lecture are here in the introduction. So you can Google everything, you can find everything. If you can't find it through the Google, you can find it from my website. So in my website, teaching, you'll see that if you go, where is it? Yeah, let's just go to, here, my website, teaching courses. You'll see my teaching philosophy on a YouTube video, as well as a link to a YouTube channel where everything is uploaded. So if you need to see anything about what we did in the undergraduate classes, I started doing this during the pandemic. So I'm just like, we're recording everything anyway. We're sharing this on Moodle. Why not just upload this to YouTube? So if you want to see anything from the other courses that I'm doing, if you've missed this class and you can't come on Zoom, everything is going to be uploaded to the Open Science Framework and to YouTube. So just if you want to see the slides, if you want to go together with me, if you want to click on the links, just go to this and come here to the first lecture and download this to your laptop. Okay. All right. I'm also open about my evaluations, and some of them are not great. To know the good and the bad about me, I share all my evaluations openly on the Open Science Framework, so you can go and have a look over there to see if what I do and how I teach matches with your expectations. There's also a teaching portfolio that you might want to check out. And there's also a team that summarizes everything that I've done with undergraduate students in my classes, and we call this the core team. So if you'll go to my website, it's called Core Team over here, and you'll see everything that I've ever done in my classes and how this has led to submissions to journals and publications. So you can see that even the team, all of this HKU based, has a Google Scholar page and already like a nice sizable H index with all of the students included, and I'll come back to this. The one with Heyman and Ariely, let me see if I can find this here. Yeah, so rewarding more is better for soliciting help. So that's the one that we've done together. And if you've taken my courses, it is probably somewhere in the submission lifecycle, either published or in some journal somewhere awaiting. And what you'll see here is that we recruited an early career researcher, and I'll explain exactly what that means, followed by the students, followed by the teaching assistant. Back then it was Boli, and then myself submitted to the journal. So you can go and check out everything that we've done in this team. You'll see a lot of there's like a summary and all the publications and our team with everybody that was included, all the replications that we've completed, and then all the planned replications and the things that I'm doing with my students. So we'll come back to this, but you should definitely check it out if you want. There's also the OSF. All the things are on YouTube. And finally, we're getting to the syllabus. So if you want, you can scan the barcode. I'll just stand on this page for a second. Or if you want, you can use this link, mgto.org, HKU 2023, Psych 6010. I'll go over this very, very briefly with you right now, just to give you a general sense, and then I'll walk through the teaching philosophy behind this. The important thing is here at the end. Actually, to attend this class, there is a quiz on the syllabus. It's impossible to fail this quiz. You just have to do next, and enter some details and do some very basic tasks. But by the end of the agile period, you must complete this quiz. This is very, very important because we need to align expectations. So I consider the syllabus to be a little bit of a contract between us. It's a very long syllabus. It's 35 pages. It's longer than the usual at HKU, but I think this is very, very important so that you know what you're getting into when you're taking this course. Okay, so you'll get I'll show you in the syllabus where this is, but you'll get a link to a Qualtrics, that is the quiz on the syllabus. It just makes sure that you've read the different things, that you've provided all the details, and you must complete this by the end of the agile period, the end of the second week. Okay? All right, so let's have a very quick look at the syllabus. So this is our syllabus. You can see the contact details. This is me, Christy, by appointment. We have a Slack. Have any of you ever used Slack before? Some of you? Okay. So I will ask you to install Slack. I think the best is not just on your laptop, but also on your mobile. And this is the way that we'll communicate. There's all sorts of reasons why we use Slack, but this is how we communicate and do things in the core team, with students, with collaborators from the outside. And to join the Slack, you can just use this link over here. And if you have any questions, you just post the questions on Slack. It works a little bit like WhatsApp or a little bit like Messenger, and there's a way to tag. So if you need to tag me and you want me to get an alert, you just the strudel and then my name. You can talk to each other publicly or privately. You can form your own channels if you want them to. The good thing about Slack, and the reason why I don't use emails, if you want something personal and you don't want other people to know this, definitely use email and write to me, and I'll tell you how to do this. But if there's something about the course, I want everybody to be able to see this. The problem is sometimes that students come to me individually and then they ask me questions and then I give them the answer, but the rest of the people in the class don't actually know about this. So to make sure that everybody understands and everybody benefits from the interaction, we need everything to be public, which is part of the concept of open science. So for example, if Christy communicates with any of you, I can go and have a look and see if everything has been answered sufficiently. If I have some insight that Christy perhaps does not know, then I can add, and vice versa. Sometimes I answer something, but Christy has something additional to say. Sometimes even students can offer some insights that I don't have. So for example, when you're working on your projects, perhaps you've seen something in your project that can help another student. So it would be good to have everything in a public interaction, which is why we use Slack. And it's a lot more immediate. Moodle has all sorts of issues, so we'll use that for now. Course objectives, learning outcomes, look at this later. There's also the links to the evaluations and everything if you want to check this out. I think it's very important because in the first 2 years that I ran the courses, a lot of people had some misaligned expectations. So I think it's very important that you also read why not to take this course and go over that to see that this matches with your expectations. All sorts of things to think about this course. General advice, for example, your work-life balance comes first. I don't know why HKU, we don't emphasize this enough, but I do not expect you to work nights. I do not expect you to work weekends. This is not supposed to overwhelm you and depress you or cause all sorts of any other things. If this is the state that you're in, we did not understand each other. Perhaps I misplanned something. Please come and tell me, and I'll make your life easier. We will work things out, but you are the first priority, not the science and not the projects and not the course and not HKU. So I don't want you to self-sacrifice in order to make it in this course. So work-life balance is very, very important. And keep this in mind. I also recommend this when you work in your labs. Nothing should be a priority over you being able to have, sufficient work-life balance and be healthy, mental health, be healthy in your life. teaching philosophy. We'll go through this a little bit. There's a structure. There are two main assignments that I'll ask you to do for this class. The first one kind of gets you ready for the second one. In the first one, maybe I'll, yeah, let's make this bigger. It's a registered replication report, RRR, but you'll look at a real replication report that I've done with my students. I will use the ones that are the most recent that I've done with my guided thesis students, and you will evaluate that. You will look at what they've done, you will look at the target article that they replicated, and you will check that everything is okay. So every year, I try with the new courses to evaluate the things that we've done together with HQ students in the previous years. So hopefully next year, somebody will evaluate what it is that you do here. There's lots of reasons of why to do these RR assessments. I think that really, when you read articles, when we look at the literature, we don't understand what they're doing. The methods are so brief, the scales are not specified, there's just so much that goes on that we don't even think about. So sometimes we just jump to the results, we look at the t-test or ANOVA or whatever they ran, and then, oh, they found p-value lower than 0.05. RRR assessment really gets you to think about every little step that they've done. And it gets you to see how I've done things with others, with undergraduates, so that you'll know that this is possible in your own projects. So it really takes you a step by step. We have a template for everything that you'll do in this course. There's a very, very long template. It's just walking you through step by step what it is that you need to do in order to get that done. This is considered to be kind of like the introduction to the much larger project that you have. And this is the most important one, because this is the one that we aim to submit to journals together. It's going to be a real replication project. And this is the thing over here. I know that some of you might not know what is a registered report. We'll talk about what a registered report is, but the aim is to do a registered report stage 1 together in teams of real replication projects. So we'll assign replication targets to you, and you'll be working on that. In many of these, it's not just a replication, but because HKU really cares about novelty and contribution to the literature and all of that, we also add extensions. It could be something very, very small, like they're missing a control condition, or it could be something a little bit bigger that connects to the theoretical contribution of the entire literature. But we'll get to that. So a registered report stage 1 of a replication and extension, okay? So this is the main component of this course. In order to pass this course, you will need to get to a stage where there is going to be a manuscript that's ready for submission. What that looks like, how to get this done, we'll do this together. So these are the kind of like assessment components. I was very surprised that there's actually no grading in this class. It's a pass or fail. But I expect great things from you. Therefore, I have high expectations of what it means for you to pass this course. You can see how I and Christy are going to calculate things. There's a very detailed criteria that we've used with the undergraduates. But in general, I expect, because I think all of the undergraduates in my class, especially in the one with Heyman and Ariely, everybody got an A or A+. So everybody, of course, if you are able to achieve a very high quality academic submission as an undergraduate, how can you get anything but an A? So I've had a lot of discussions with the department. What do you mean? You have to standardize this? 5% need to fail? What do you mean? Like, no, if you've done a good job, you deserve to have an A. This is like my philosophy. And then what I'm saying is that if undergraduates have been able to do real science projects and bring those to a level high quality enough in order for us to submit this to journals, I should hope that you would as well. And honestly, if you want to stay in academia, I know that you come from different fields. Perhaps you care more about neuro or cognitive psychology or something else that's not what it is that I know and will focus on here. But at the end, to have a preprint with your name, as us in a collaboration, possibly, potentially as a submission to a journal, is a good thing for your career. So almost everything that we do, including these components, we aim to submit to journal. Almost every hackathon that we'll do in almost every session is aimed towards a journal submission. So ideally, by the end of this course, you'll have a few preprints of things with your name on it that you'll be able to add to your CV, citable, that everybody will see the good job that you've done. So hopefully this will be a good motivator for you. So this is the components over here. In terms of the schedule, the first 2 weeks ADRA period, I will mostly be up here talking, but starting from the third session, we'll actually do hackathons. And hackathons means we sit together working on a real problem at the same time. So we'll separate into teams, we'll open Google Docs, Google Sheets, and collaboratively get a task done. There's a great conference that I go to every year when there was a pandemic. We did this from remote. It's called SIPS, the Society for Improvement of Psychological Science. I strongly recommend that you attend this, either from remote or actually go there. The nice thing about this conference, where I got to know the hackathon methodology, is that I'm very, very tired of going to conferences where I sit in the back and then I see scholars from Ivy League presenting their research and patting themselves in the back. Look how great my research is. And then at the end of the conference, 3 days of listening to people talk about all the great research, you're asking, so what am I left with? What have I done? What have I learned from this whole thing? With SIPS, you have 3 to 5 days where people sit together working on real problems, from undergraduates, people from outside academia, all the way to full professors, journal editors, as if they're equal. There's no hierarchy. There's a problem, everybody pitches in, opens the Google Doc, contributes the best that they can. And at the end of the conference, you have real resources, just like the one that I showed you with the R Markdown, that everybody can use. In addition, all of those lead to submissions where everybody is a co-author. So you have, from an average conference, you have something like 20, 30 submissions to journals, some days with 50 co-authors, but something real happens and people can use these resources. So I'm hoping to try and adopt this here so that every session will get something that you can use, or something that you can learn from, or something that we can offer the community. Okay. In addition, typically in undergraduate course, we have tutorials, or in this course, sometimes the second session is considered to be a tutorial. There are already a lot of tutorials that we've done. So for example, one of the first things that you want to know is how to use Slack. So Christy did this video over here, so you can go and you can open this. In the second week, because we're doing everything in teams, I'll ask you to do a team contract. So there's a video on this as well. And then our assessment, how to do our assessment, there's a video as well. But if there's an additional need, I'll just add more links over there. So for every step of the way, you're not the first that are going to do these tasks. For everything, there's a tutorial. For everything, there's a video that you can open. Just look at these supporting resources to go over. Okay, so lots of hackathons. There are all sorts of deadlines of things that you'll need to submit. The quiz, this is the link to the quiz. So by the end of the second week, please do this quiz to make sure that you can be with us in this course. Yeah, so our assessment is due here. Then part 1 of the register report stage 1 is here, then part 2, and then there's a peer review somewhere in here. And then at the end, there's a revision and a submission of the team report. Okay, what else do we want over here? Yeah, so in terms of teams, we'll work in, how many do we have here? 26.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so we have, yeah. Okay, so 26. Yeah, originally I thought we'll do this in groups, in teams of 4. We have 6 targets, so it's 24. Perhaps one team will be, 2 teams will be more than 4. So we'll think about how to do this. Christy will make an announcement of how you can form your teams and how to best do this. I'll show you what the targets are, so you can also, if you have like something that you're very, very passionate about, you can have a look and see, yeah, what you prefer. But generally, in order for teams to work together, I think one of the things that you can get from this course are basic skills about how to communicate in science. So I think it's like speaking up in class is definitely a skill that you'll need as a scientist, because you'll need to communicate what it is that you talk about to others in a way that's clear, concise, and to the point. But working in a team, working effectively in a team is something that's very, very important. And I think depending on what lab you're in, the way that I was trained in my PhD is basically to do everything on my own. So I need to do everything from beginning to end, and I rely on myself. Maybe the advisor, the very busy advisor, when they have time for me, maybe they will look over things for half an hour and give me some comments about how to revise everything that I've done so far. But generally, we need to find a lot of people to work with us on the same level as us to help us do better. And we have complementary skills. So perhaps you're very good at this, but not very good at that, and somebody else is exactly the opposite. And then you come together in order to create something wonderful together. In order to make sure the teams work well, we have something called a team contract. And I think it's very important that you have a team, that you align expectations, that you get to know one another, and you'll make sure that all of you know what each person is supposed to contribute. So we'll distribute the team contract for you to have a look. But you can already see the team contract template over here. And then at the end of the course, I will ask you to reflect on the teamwork. I will ask you to evaluate your team members and also evaluate yourself. And then most of the grading is based on that. So how do you evaluate yourself? How do others evaluate you? So peer evaluations, you can see the impact on the grade. Team projects, you can see our assessment, the links to everything that's been done before. I won't go into that right now. Projects list, I'll come back to this in a second. And this is the register report stage 1 for replications and extensions. So you'll see that we have a lot of resources, which are also on my website, but you have a link here if you want to get to know this. This is generally how we do things. I really wish we did this more at HKU, but I'll just say very, very briefly, stage 1 of our register report does not have any data. We write a pre-registration together, which is the very, very detailed plan of what we aim to do. The way that we write this plan is that we basically write the manuscript. We write the manuscript as if we have data. You have an entire introduction, you have the entire methods, and the results section is written on simulated data. So I will show you how to construct in Qualtrics a survey, how to produce randomized data, and how to conduct the data analysis on that. So the results look exactly what they would look like as if this had real data. The only thing is that everything is noise, so nothing should come out as p-value lower than 0.05. So this is a stage 1 registered report that we submit to the journal. Then we get feedback. You didn't do this analysis correctly. You haven't looked at that. We do all of this before the data collection. And then finally, when the reviewers, the editor, and us agree that this is the best plan to move forward, they give us something called an in-principle acceptance, which means no matter what the outcome is, p-value does not need to be lower than 0.05. This is a guaranteed publication. So together, we write the stage 1 register report based on randomized data that we get from the Qualtrics. So this is how it's done. We have the Qualtrics, we randomly generate the data, we write everything, the full introduction, the methods, the results. We have a first draft. I go on Twitter and say, HKU students have done this, who wants to help? Then people come from the outside and look at sometimes even the original authors will come in and add things on your Google Docs. Then you will have some time to revise, and then we have a final submission. So this is how the whole process works. This is what you need to submit at part 1. This is what you need to submit at part 2. How to add extensions. Of course, we have a guide for this as well. Okay, and then finally the targets. So if you want to know which targets we'll be working on together over here, then I picked some classics. I don't know if you're familiar with Daniel Kahneman, the only psychologist to ever win the Nobel Prize. So he has a really nice article in Psychological Science called Focusing Illusion. So that's a funky one that I really like. I've been wanting to replicate this for a long time. Very impactful. A bunch of other things about if you're more into health psychology. So there's something here about how to communicate things effectively so that doctors will understand the statistics that they're seeing. There's something here about classic things in judgment and decision making, how to best present statistics. This is more like applied cognitive psychology if you're into that. Temporal discounting, a little bit more of like kind of like a management orientation if you're into that, and a little bit about waste. So we have 6 projects, 26 students, I guess 4 to 5 in each team, and then a bunch of grading. Any question about anything that I said so far in the syllabus? Everything clear? Seems reasonable? Oh, sorry, no. All right. Yeah, so this kind of summarizes everything that I just told you. So originally this was supposed to be about statistics, but I don't think you need this. I think this is too easy for you. I think what you really need is to experience science and prepare you for an academic journey so that you can really decide if academia is for you or not, and then how to go through an academic submission. So I don't know if you get to do this enough with your advisor in your labs, or do you have like teams where you collaborate with others? But I really feel like we should go through this together so that we'll know what science really is. Okay, so this is kind of like my view. Traditional teaching is what I'm doing right now, and I really shouldn't. But some people like Adam Grant over here really got me to rethink this whole idea. So if you like a nice book, think again. I really think that what we need in classroom is a scientist mindset. We need a lot of humility. So I don't think professors have some amazing knowledge that we bestow upon you. I think we're all capable of contributing. I've learned a lot from the undergraduates that took my courses. It's just it's baffling to me just how little I know, and how some of them are so much better than me at Googling things and definitely writing R code. Just it's a very humbling experience to do science. I think many times you would be expected to have everything clear. So you think maybe as an academic, all the professors have everything sorted out. They know exactly what they're doing. I can tell you, professors have no idea what they're doing because there's no way of knowing what you're doing, because this is reality. This is science. Science is messy. There's a lot of confusion. We have very limited time. We have a lot of cognitive biases and limitations on our ability to think. Therefore, we really need to think of a different way of doing this, teaching students to question knowledge. So how to gain knowledge, how to learn. When I was in Maastricht University for my postdoc, so this is a university in the Netherlands, it was formed 45 years ago on something called problem-based learning, which some places at HKU are trying to do. And it was amazing because actually I did not have to give lectures, and I didn't even participate. I just sat over there in the back and looked at how the students were solving problems. So we gave them a problem, and the problem could be run a replication and let them figure this out. So they would come up with their own learning goals. They would come up with their own the resources, how to gain the information. They integrated this together. They created mind maps, and then at the end they came out with a solution. So if you want to see what that looks like and why I adopted this kind of method, you can click on this video and look at this later. So when I came to HKU 6 years ago, I decided should be more about students, should be student-led. It should be about actual science in the classroom, that potentially is publishable and has real impact on the community, where you can partake in how to write pre-registrations, how to do peer review to one another, and how to receive and give peer review, and then using the latest trends in psychological science. Open science is very important for everything that we do. So we share everything that we have, we communicate everything transparently, including our mistakes. And we will make a lot of mistakes. I make a lot of mistakes, and mistakes are completely natural. I want you to call me out on mistakes. I want you to tell me when I'm wrong. To tell you just how committed I am to you telling me how wrong I am, when you're doing RRR assessments and you're checking my work with my students, first, it's good for you to pass this grade and to learn from this. But it's more than that. Actually, I call upon you and everybody in the community to find errors in my research. So if you go to my website, you'll see that there's a section here that's called Check Me, Replicate Me. So this is a pledge, and this is what I offer, and this is what I'll pay you. So I pay students, I pay anybody who finds mistakes in my research. So $5 for a small mistake, $50 for a major mistake. If you find something in your RRR assessment, this is not just for good grades, this is also for cash. You can get money. We need to invite others to attack our research and our science. We make mistakes. I don't know if it was in your class, but in one of the classes, students found mistakes from previous classes, and we paid. I give the option of getting cash, or if they decide to donate this to something like GiveWell, then I match it. For every dollar they put in, I also put in. So you can choose which one of these paths to go. And I document everything, all the corrections of my work, everything that has been needed some clarifications. I put this on my website. So we have to clear the literature. We have to correct our mistakes. We must do this. Okay, so we have a lot of hackathons planned. We'll talk a little bit about that later on, but we'll do some things hands-on. So yeah, we're doing replications extensions, we're doing science assessments, and we're working on a bunch of templates. I'm gonna go through this. If you just want to know how many people participated in the core team, so all the undergraduates that have ever been in my class, so about 365 students went through my classes, did real science projects. At the end of the course, we actually don't submit this to journals yet. I go on Twitter and said, HKU students did this. Who wants to help us bring this to publication? And then early career researchers, MPhil, PhD, postdocs, some of them beginning of assistant professor, coming and say, we want to work with HKU students. And then they come in, they verify everything that you've done. So this is another checks and balances in order to make sure everything is accurate. And they, together with me, go through the whole process of submitting this to the journal, replying to the peer review, and so forth. How many have we had? About 40 early career researchers. And then all of the thesis students that work with me, I'll talk a little bit about that. Thesis with me, it has to go through journal submission. So undergraduates and MSc that do a thesis with me submit to something called peer community and register report. And by the end of the year, it has to be published. So I'll talk about how this magic happens later on. But these are all the undergraduates are here, masters here, that have worked with me to do that. So this is the big team from around the world, people from all the way to Brazil, yeah, various places. How many have we done together at HKU? We've done about 80 pre-registered studies with data collection. So the first 2.5 years, within one semester, I actually collected data. So they wrote the pre-registration in the first 1.5 months, and then I spent 2 weeks collecting the data, and then they analyzed this. And by the end of the semester, we had a complete manuscript with data, all analyzed and written up. But starting from the last 2 years, we moved to a registered report, stage 1, submitting a pre-registration to the journal. So we have about 40 of these ongoing. We have 20, you saw on my website, about 20 collaborative guides. And we did a bunch, 36 research assessments. These are all the guides that we have, so quite a bit going on over here. So hopefully you'll have some time to look at this. Some people ask me, why should we do replications? Like, what's the point of doing a replication with students? There's not a lot of people in the world that do this. Now it's increasingly, it's growing. So I know 4 universities where some instructors are doing this thing. But what is the logic of doing replications? So you raised a very good point about sometimes we don't know what actually works. So when I go to a course and I have a textbook and they tell me, please teach this textbook to the students, I actually can't do that, because when I flip through the pages of this book, I don't know what is reliable and not reliable. So instead of taking these textbooks and saying, you know, for each thing that I'm going to tell you today, you can flip a coin, maybe it's real, maybe it's not. I will try and replicate all these together with you. So there are 120 things that we've done in social psychology and judgment decision making is for me to be really able to come to the classroom and tell the students, I've seen this firsthand, we've replicated this together, and now I know that this is reliable or that we need to look at this more carefully, like we have in some of the other issues. So we have verification of the literature. The only way is to do more replications. And unfortunately, I don't really understand why, but we have this obsession with novelty that we talked about with this publication bias. But we definitely need a lot more replications, and it's still very difficult to get replications published. So we need more replications. Not a lot of people are doing replications. So it allows you to do a verification. It allows you to reproduce and see what exactly has been done over there. Some of them from the 1970s, 80s, 90s, the materials have been lost. So there's a lot of value in us just being able to reproduce what it is that they've done in terms of their material and reproduce what it is that they've done in terms of their methods. So going back, there is value in just us repeating what it is that's been done, but was lost. So reproducibility and verification. Replicability is to increase the confidence in some results, or perhaps have some questions risen to that. In many cases, we can look at whether this is generalizable or not, because if something was done in the 80s in a Stanford students psychology class with 10 participants, does it mean that for till the end of time, 50 years later at the University of Hong Kong, this is still relevant? No, but this is how we teach. In social psychology, it's even a little bit better than some of the other fields, because in neuroscience, in developmental, we have a real problem because our samples are tiny. Everything is so time consuming, everything is so expensive that somebody did some study and measurement in neuroscience. My gosh, everything is just going in every direction, right? So based on one study that has been done on 10 people in some sample in the 1970s or 80s, we now assume that this is generalizable to everywhere. So of course, replications allow us to look at whether this is generalizable or not. So after HKU students have done what they've done, I go around the world and I give workshops. And for example, one of the teams in Brazil said, this is terrific, we also want to do this. So they took some of your HKU student replications. The only thing that they did was translate this to Portuguese and run this in a Brazilian sample and then see, does it differ from what the HKU students ran, yes or no? So this already allows for the community together to check whether something is generalizable or not. Sometimes we can inform theory, and sometimes we can reignite lost interest. This I really want you to consider for your thesis. Whatever your stage right now of your PhD or where you are with your thesis, I have come to think that this is the best way to do things as a career choice in academia. If I would do my PhD again, I would start from that. Replications and extensions, I think, are the best way to make sure that something valuable, meaningful, that you have insights from the research that you do. Because if you focus on doing something that is 100% novel, first of all, you don't know whether this would work out because it's a little bit of a gamble. It's something completely new. You're not relying on any foundations. And that gamble can really backfire. It's not because you're not clever. It's not because your advisor is not capable. It's just because there's a real chance that, first of all, things that you've read in the literature are not solid enough. And then there's a chance that the way that you interpreted what the literature said, assuming that it's solid, did not do a good enough job. So the way to really know how to address, how to make sense of this, is to do a replication and extension. Why? If both of them worked, terrific. You know, we verified what was there before. So we've helped the community understand that the foundations are solid, and you've contributed something amazing. So that's the extension. If the extension doesn't work, but the replication works, then you know, okay, at least my foundations are solid. I just need a different idea. What can I do in order to do a better extension and have a better contribution? Sometimes happen to us that the extension worked, but the replication didn't work. And that means that you've been able to identify something that the original authors and the published literature did not notice or have done wrong. So now you can really help the literature to do better, saying that thing that was published does not work. Avoid that. Instead, look at my extension and see what it is that I've done. So differentiating between replication and extension really allows you to gain insights and know exactly what you're doing. Incremental steps, instead of one big leap and a big gamble that by the end of the third and the fourth year, perhaps will backfire. This way, you will have a step by step and you'll know where you are in order to do better research at the end. So we'll learn a lot about collaboration. You between yourselves, you with me and Christy, all of us together with the academic community. When I go on Twitter and I invite them to look at your Google Docs and what it is that they'll do. So we have a lot of people checking everything, and we'll learn how to bring this all together to work. So this is how I've done things. I went over this part over here. This is traditionally how I did this in the first 2 years. We'll skip that. And then finally, the big question that every time when I talk about this and I present this, so I do replication projects with undergraduates, with students at HQ. I often get the question is like, okay, this is a great education exercise, but can students and early career researchers really have an impact? Can they really contribute to the community? And I want you, if you take anything from this introduction session, I want you to take this, that you can really believe in yourself, that we have the real potential. Students are the real promise in order to tackle all the problems with all the replication crisis, with all the need for the science reform. So my answer to this is definitely yes. So this is the number of publications that the HKU students had in 2021. So we're talking about 15 of those. The way that we did this, if you look at this, so some of them are guided thesis students. I think Nadia is still here, Nadia Adelina. You can go and talk to her. She also did a talk at HKU and a Psychology Today column that we'll get to. But what you can see here is that all the undergraduates are underlined, and then you've got the early career researcher that came in as the first author, and everybody is marked as a shared first co-author in a note with this star, followed by the teaching assistants. And at the beginning, we weren't sure, are people going to publish replications? But actually, we were able to get this into some pretty good journals. So probably you come from different domains, you're not familiar with social psychology or JDM, judgment decision making, but some of them are quite reputable. So for example, social psychological and personality science is considered to be like a leading journal. So we've had a lot of examples with this back and forth. This is from 2022, and even in 2023, I didn't update this since May, but we've had quite a few of those coming out as well. Yeah, so these are the assessments. You can go and have a look at the reports. In the first year, I ran the assessments on other people. So I ran this on the Many Labs collaboration, on the Open Science collaboration that did the science paper in 2015, because I wanted students to learn. And then people said, okay, great, you're doing assessments, but you're not assessing yourself. First, assess yourself before you assess others. And I said, yes, you're right. So in 2020 and 2021, we did assessments of our own research, and it seems to be working. So specifically here, we have somebody who was part of this team that did a replication of Heyman and Ariely. So Heyman and Ariely, what was interesting about this is that we actually found mistakes in the target article. And when we submitted the replication, this was a replication of a paper in psychological science. So when we submitted this to psychological science and said, we did a replication, which was actually successful. We did 2 replications of this, and both of them are successful. Please publish this and point out that one of the reasons why you should publish this, aside from replications being important, is that we've identified statistical errors in the target article by Heyman and Ariely. Unfortunately, the editor decided to desk reject us because it's a replication and she has all sorts of other things. I was a little bit upset about that, but not too bad. But then she did something very important. She reached out to Dan Ariely and said, what's going on with the statistics over here? And together, Dan Ariely and Psychological Science issued an expression of concern. So I don't know if you're familiar with the blog Retraction Watch, but they follow all the expression of concerns and all the things with fraud and whatever else. And then they wrote about a team of students that did an assessment at HKU. And this led to the expression of concern. And I also told you about students finding errors. So this is all the errors that they found and how much I paid for each team and all of that. But I'm very grateful for this. So both here with the expression of concern and here, we were able to either clear the literature and make sure that the mistakes are not there anymore, or we were able to find errors in hours before we submitted this to the journal. So this has really made me feel blessed. So very grateful for the students that were able to do this. Okay, we talked about teamwork, uncertainty, not for everybody, high, low. Why should you take this course? I really believe this, but it's completely okay if you don't. I really think that the best way to learn is to actually do things. You can sit passively, you can listen to me, be on your mobile or your laptop, whatever it is that you do passively does not get you to learn. Even when you listen to YouTube videos or you see other people doing this, you don't learn from that. The only way to learn is to really engage and do something yourself. So the whole course is structured for you to challenge yourself, to learn from actually doing, to raise things so that we can discuss this and overcome the challenges together. So you'll get to experience science for good or bad. And at the end, there's real impact. We are aiming this for a contribution to the community. If you want to hear some of the feedback, this the testimonials. I just want you to summarize this whole thing. How do students feel about this? So you can go and read my evaluations to see. Not all of them are good. Some of them are bad. So for example, some of them say the workload is unnecessarily intense. I don't think it's unnecessarily, because I think this is the only course that you'll ever do at HKU that actually gives you this kind of experience. So one course out of all the other courses. So I feel like this is a worthwhile investment. This project is really tough. Can you imagine as an undergraduate to having to go through that, right? Sometimes there's confusing guidelines. Sometimes it's completely overwhelming. Sometimes there's contradictions. There's all sorts of things that go in different directions. So I can promise you, I make a lot of mistakes. Sometimes I'm not very clear. We have 20 guides. There's so many templates. It's very difficult for one person to manage this, even with Christy's wonderful help. You know, it's a lot of things in there can get really confusing. But I can promise you that at the end of the course, you'll figure it out. You'll understand, you'll be able to achieve. If you follow our guidance, if you raise questions, together we'll be able to make this happen. So at the end, I think students were quite pleased with what they've learned in this course. And I really like the first one, summary, because what I was aiming for is that, so if you can turn a 3052 advanced social psychology course into journal submissions, it would be one of the most revolutionary miracles in HKU psychology. It's not a miracle because of me, it's a miracle because of the students. I've never seen students so committed and so willing to come and work with me on something. I've tried this in other places in the world. It did not go as smoothly. It has to do with the quality of the students, it has to do with you and your ability to execute and your motivation. So I think it's amazing what we were able to achieve together. So students can really make a contribution. And I really hope that we would have more of these things at HKU. So Nadia, I don't know if you met Nadia, but she is here somewhere. She gave a talk. She has 2 publications with us. One she took in my courses, and then she did a thesis with me. Both of them would publish at the end. Cora did a master's with me. So that was one of our first publications. So that was nice. So both of their talks you can go and listen to. We also have a Psychology Today column. So we have that. At the end, if you finish a project with me and you want to write for Psychology Today, or you want to do a talk, very happy to. If you want to hear the perspective of the early career researchers from around the world who are going to work with you and what you do in this. So Max here published with us, Hero published, I think, and there's 2 more that he's working on right now. So there's a really nice talk on YouTube by Max and 2 Psychology Today columns. Adrian, he's done so much with us. It's amazing. It's just, he keeps on going. It's terrific. So this is the course, the overview, just to tell you about my philosophy, what I'm hoping to do here with you. I hope that I've convinced you that this is something worthwhile trying. If I haven't, that's completely okay. If you want to do something that's different than this, I am open to that. But we would need to talk about that. So I can prepare an alternative for you away from these team projects. And I can, if you want something a bit more traditional, we can do that as well. But I'm really hoping that you'll go along with me in order to try that. Any questions about anything that we've talked about so far? No? Okay. I think you deserve a break, right? That was a lot. Okay, so let's do like 20 minutes and come back. Can I ask you, since you're sitting, we have a couple of minutes, just raised right now, I just want to know, when you do your data analysis, what program do you use? So I'll just say the programs and raise your hand if this is what you use, okay? So how many of you use SPSS? How many of you use MATLAB? Some? Oh, well, okay. How many of you use R? Oh, so some of you use more than one, okay. Good. Jamovi? What's funny? What?
Just really like them.
Sorry?
I just really like Jamovi and easy to use.
You like Jamovi because it's easy to use. Yeah, good. You know that Jamovi runs on R, right? Yeah, perfect. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Last one I wanted to ask is JASP. Use JASP? A little bit of JASP? Okay. Good. How many of you have had the experience of completing science projects from beginning to end with data analysis as a manuscript submission to journal? Oh, some of you already have. That's terrific. Very nice. Okay. How many of you have been able to bring this to a publication, like went through peer review? Some of you have? Well done. That's terrific. Good. Okay. I am going to tell you like stories or things that are happening right here, but I have a lot more information to share. I choose a very specific way of looking at things, but if you ask me questions, I'm able to elaborate or share more stories about other aspects. So if you see something that's interesting to you in those stories, even better, if you have a story that you want to share about, some of you have brought things to publication, some of you have submitted to journals, what peer review looks like, what a journal publication looks like, what it means to do a research project, some of the challenges that we're going to talk about, I am very happy to hear from you. So go ahead and tell me. Can raise your hand or just go ahead and say it. I really wish that we can have in the first 2 sessions, it's not going to be as interactive as the other ones, but I do want you to try and bring in something from your own experience. And it seems like some of you really have experience with this. I will just tell you this from my PhD experience. I feel like my PhD experience was very, very bad in the sense that I did not even grow up in a psychology department. I grew up in a management department, in a business school, in Saigon, Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. And management is about a decade behind psychology in everything that's open science related. A lot of the things that I learned in my PhD, I had to unlearn, because not only did they not help me do science, they taught me to do bad science. I feel like it's very important that we are able to identify what is bad science and to identify what seems to be the right direction in order to overcome these. I also want to say in advance that what I am going to tell you is controversial at HKU. I am an outlier, and I am perceived to be very extreme in my views and my endorsement of open science. It's very possible that if you, and you should, talk to your advisor about some of these issues, they will have a completely different perspective on this, and that they will think that all these things that I am talking about are completely okay, and that this is the way that science. So we have a discussion. I am a minority in this discussion. Most of HKU and the scientific community is not with me on these topics. So whatever it is that you hear me say, take it, as a minority perspective. Question everything that I'm telling you. Go and seek out your own questions and answers to everything that I'm presenting. This is just my view, okay? But I feel like at HKU, we should have more people expressing diverse views of what science should be. So sometimes, deliberately, I will take a very extreme perspective in order to try and shift you a little bit from the other direction that perhaps everybody else is taking you in. Is that clear? Is that okay? All right. All right, so we have a lot of challenges that we need to tackle. I've had a lot of time sitting with myself in a room in about 6 or 7 quarantines during the pandemic, asking myself if what I'm doing is really helping the world. So we have all these challenges. We have climate change. We had the pandemic, a lot of things in terms of the economy, all sorts of threats. And recently Putin started to do all sorts of things. It's already been a year. It's unbelievable. But we have all sorts of things that are threatening the world and changing the way that we. And then the question is, us as scientists, can we do something? So we're here in the psychology department doing our clinical things there, a little bit of judgment decision making there. Like, do we really have the potential to have any impact? And it's something that's bothering me, because I want to know that aside from 3 people reading my article throughout my, that I have something more to contribute, that this has an impact that people are doing. And what's becoming very clear is, especially in the pandemic, we realize that we need credible, optimized science. We can't go through 5 years of peer review process in order to vet the vaccine, or we can't have a publication bias where we need credible research in order to see everything. So we need to know, does this treatment work or not work? And we need to know this as fast as possible and as credible as possible, so we don't make strategic mistakes. And the main question that I want to pose to you, which I ask myself almost every day when I do research, is how is science doing? When you read articles for your thesis, when you come to treat patients, when you work with actual people in real life, how do you feel about science? And I want to share with you some case studies about things that I see in science, which to me are very, very troubling. I'll start with this one. It's not from psychology, because I want to make it very, very clear that the things that we're talking about are about science. They're not about psychology. So people are talking about replicability crisis in psychology or psychological science or in social psychology. This is definitely not the case. One of the earliest projects that started from the Center of Open Science, and the Center of Open Science is the same one that does the Open Science Framework, what we'll be using in order to do the pre-registrations and the data sharing. They started this mass replication project of cancer biology. So this is what happened at the beginning. They designed 193 experiments, trying to go back to the literature. And we're talking about cancer, so treatments for cancer. If a treatment does not work well, something very bad happens. People get hurt and people die. So they wanted to see in the published literature of everything in cancer biology, let's take 193 that generally have their materials or things are pretty straightforward, and let's try and replicate this to see if we get exactly the same outcomes. So before you see what the outcomes are, I want you to ask yourself, let's say that you or your loved ones or somebody in society has cancer and you want to have treatment. what would be a good replicability rate for you to feel like you have trust in science, that when you go to a medical hospital and you get the treatments, this is the kind of rate that you would like to see? Ideally, 100%. I don't want them to mess up anything, right? If it's not 100%, you're saying, okay, so maybe things are noisy. Randomness of the universe, maybe this was done in a certain context and now it wouldn't exactly work on me. There's all sorts of differences. There's different biology, genes, context. Who knows? So maybe to account for that, you take this a little bit lower than 100%. Nothing is 100%. What would you expect? So they expected a fairly high replicability rate. They started with 193, but they were only able to really conduct 87 of those. Why is that? Because when you read an article, not just in psychology, but also in cancer biology, and you're trying to understand what did they do in the experiment? What exactly did they inject people, or what was the procedure in order to do this treatment for cancer? They don't know, because it's not specified. If we're not specifying things in a research article, what are we doing? How are people supposed to be using this? So from 193, only 87 could start. But then, when they, in order to get the materials, contacted the authors in order to say, we can't find the materials. We don't know what you've done. What is the procedure? Can you please share your lab protocol? A lot of them said what? The dog ate my homework. It was lost. I moved universities. It's in a different, it was a long time ago. But if this is really science and we're using these treatments, we need to be able to access that information. We can't have these kinds of excuses. And then when we start with 87, how many are completed? 50 are completed. I'm not saying successful replications. How many are completed? 50. Why? Because even when we had the materials and the protocols, not everything works. We realized that some of the things were actually impossible. They wrote things that just couldn't be, or they missed some information. So already from 193, only 50 replications were completed. How many of them were successful? So here's a summary of this whole thing. A full replication, 5 out of the 50. A partial replication, 7 out of the 50. Not interpretable or not replicable, all the rest. So we started with 193. How many were successful at least partially replicating? 12. This, if I would ever to have cancer, or somebody that I love have cancer, this is very, very troubling. And before that, there were mostly findings from social psychology and psychology saying we can't replicate all the findings, but the hard sciences know what they're doing. Chemistry knows what they're doing. Physics knows what they're doing. Medicine knows what they're doing. They really don't. So cancer biology, this just came back a year ago. This was a big blow to all of us, and definitely a big blow for all the hard sciences that said, yeah, there's no problem. Only social psychology has a replicability problems. So how big are these problems? I think they are very, very big. And there's lots of reasons for why these things are happening to us in science overall. And I just, over the years, I took a bunch of headlines in order to share with you. So it's definitely not limited to psychology. So medicine has a problem. This is about the cancer biology part. And then we have things in economics and even chemical research. And most recently, 2020, computer science, and even in quantum computing, which we think, physics and math, and even with them, they have a big problem with reproducibility. So it's not just psychology, it's not just cancer biology. This is a problem across the sciences, right? So I'm going to talk about very briefly what we did in social psychology. In 2011, we realized that we have a problem. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail in what exactly happened. We'll come back to this in a few slides. But in 2011, we decided we must start doing replications. And we started doing this on a grand scale. You've probably heard of this paper from 2015, published in Science, of about 100 replications. But Actually, this was one of many collaborations. There was many lab 1, many lab 2, many lab 3, 4, 5, and they were published. And the person who coordinated these things using the Center of Open Science is Brian Nosek, and these are tweets. I will show you a lot of things from Twitter, now called X for some reason, summarizing everything from these many labs, saying that in 6 large-scale collaborations, the replication rate is 90 of 190. Some people said it's because psychological science or JPSP, all your journals in psychology are not worth anything. But if you go to Nature, to Science, to PNAS, then everything will replicate. So no, they did one with 21 findings in social sciences published in Nature and Science. How many of them replicated? About half, so 13 out of that. In all of these, not only that half were replicated, but the effect size, the impact of the intervention was about half of what was published before. So only half are replicated, and in the ones that are replicated, the effect sizes are about half of what was originally done. So this is kind of like my unofficial summary based on these mass replications. But since then, we've done a lot more replications, and we've done this again and again in many domains in social psychology. And I will give you some examples for case study, very famous case studies that we were partially involved in. Usually when I go and I talk about these things, I have a lot of immediate emotional reactions to that. I spent part of the summer going around the different conferences in Europe, and I'm already considered to be like the replication guy or the open science guy. So already when they see me from far away, they're like, no, we're doing open science, we're doing open science. I'm like, okay. Relax, I'm not here to like judge you whether you're doing open science or not. Let's just have a decent conversation about how do you feel about what's happening in science? Because it could be that I'm biased. I'm very sensitive because I'm a person who studies judgment decision making. It's very possible that I have a cognitive bias, negativity bias. I see everything as negative, nothing works. Perhaps if they look at cancer biology, they say, oh my God, 12 out of 193, this is amazing. So perhaps we have a misunderstanding. And some of the common reactions that I get are these things here. Maybe it's just psychology. And then I tell them, no, it's not just psychology. I've been tracking this for a very long time. Go and have a look at cancer biology. Go and have a look at what happens in the other fields. And I see some people say, but this doesn't affect me. All the things that are happening with your field or cancer biology, it has no impact on me. If what you do is science, if you rely on science, everything that we do relies on science, then this has an impact on you. Some people say, I know, and this happened even this summer in a conference, I know that my research replicates. My question to you is, how do you know? Have you tested this? In what way? Have you had other people, independent scholars, replicate your work in order to make sure that things replicate? And then some people said, and I'm going to give you some examples where this is completely false, but there are hundreds of publications on this. There's a meta-analysis that's been done on this. Therefore, we know that this is true, that this works. I will show an example where this is not the case. And then some people said, yeah, I replicated this again and again, therefore it must be true. Even then, the answer is not necessarily, but this is not necessarily true. So we'll talk about all of that and why this is happening. And I'm going to raise a few challenges. The 3 that were raised before are very good ones, and we'll touch a little bit on some of those. But the main thing is, and because you're going to be academics, or some of you are going to be academics or immersed in academia or talking to academics, you really need to understand that this is one of the biggest problems in academia. There is a big competition on what we are incentivized to do and what is good for science. So we are strained in all sorts of different ways, but the incentives actually don't allow us to do good science. If you think about this, in order to graduate as a PhD student in this university, in order to get your thesis done, what is it that you need to do? In the first 3-4 years at HKU, I needed to fight with my department to allow a replication to be considered as a thesis, because that was not, it needs to be novel. It needs to be something new. And then I have to go over the grading because such a big component over there is novelty, and say, before we go into novelty, let's just please make sure that we can run replications and do a thesis on this. The current incentives for me is that I need to publish what? What do I need to do in order to be a successful academic? What are the main things that I need to do? Publish in what way? How do you measure a successful academic at HKU? In order for me to get promoted, what do I need to do?
And grant.
Sorry, publication?
And grant.
Publications and grant. What does it mean, publications? Let's talk about this.
Publish your research, research.
Okay.
And then,
I get a lot of emails every day from all sorts of places telling me that if I will pay them 20,000, then they will publish my research. Are these publications?
peer-reviewed.
Peer-reviewed publications. They will even write a peer review for me. Anything else that needs to be about these publications? Sorry?
High impact factor.
High impact factor journal. What does it mean, high impact factor?
So there's some kind of numbers.
Some kind of number is a great summary. Most people don't even know what this impact factor means. Where does it come from? Why impact factor? Citations. What else? We have impact factor, number of citations, and number of publications, as many as possible, right? Need to be in good journals. Good journals being measured as high impact factor, right? But do high impact factor really means better research? Is it easy to get into high impact factor journals? Is it easy to get into high impact? I want to publish in Science and Nature. What should I do? Just submit, right? You'll get accepted immediately. What's the challenge with high impact factors?
You might have to be the research. I have to be novel enough.
Novel.
I have some tricks or amazing results, and you have to go through with several rounds of peer review.
Amazing results, several rounds. Big names on articles really helps. And the works get published, right? So the things that we read in Science, Nature, PNAS, what do they tend to be? Novelty is one of them, amazing results. Anything else? You mentioned some of the problems. They need to be significant. So null findings is not exciting enough. It's not novel. You can be very, very novel, but if you didn't find anything, you're not going to get published, right? Anything else?
Well, sorry, let's talk about the question initially.
Mm-hmm.
You just asked us how
Mm-hmm.
For HKU to judge your proposal or work, right?
Mm-hmm.
But originally, the HKU itself is just an institution.
Right.
Yes, the position's resources is limited, so they have to find some measures to judge your work.
Right.
But I think if you want some more open-minded answer, do not care about the HKU. Then we might think the question in terms of how we can find some original ideas at ancient time, or how we can address some practical problems.
Yes.
Yeah, yes.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
So your main objection is about the HKU label, or focusing on the bigger issues?
Yeah, basically it's just your the ways you ask us.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So it's very important, because there's a reason why HKU is doing what it's doing. What is the aim of HKU when it emphasizes impact factors? Yes?
QS ranking.
QS rankings or Shanghai rankings for research. What else?
Yeah, I want to say that.
Yeah.
The reason why I suppose most of the universities in this world define the success of a PhD student by its publication and possible grants. It's because it's measurable.
Yep.
Yeah. I think it's the most important reason, because when you say your work is significant, have very huge practical implication to the real world.
Perfect.
So it's just very hard to measure. Sometimes it depends on the comments from experts, but sometimes it's arbitrary.
Yeah.
So a measurable variable like impact factor, the number of publications, to some degree, maybe it's not correct enough, but it's fair to everyone.
That's a good discussion that we'll do in a few weeks, but it's a very good thing to raise, because what you're saying is, in science, we want objectivity, we want fairness, we want a clear criteria by which everybody is being measured, and then we can compare, right? And what impact factors give us is some measure, however flawed, that is better than nothing, in order to allow for us to compare ourselves to other people. QS could be a lot of problems with it. You know, it asks people, so what do you think about HKU, the job market, people in the field, people in academia, what do you think? 20%, 20%, international 20%. That's a measure. You can argue about this measure, but at least it's a measure. However, it's not a fair measure, and it's not objective. We'll talk about impact factors, but impact factors are actually negotiated. An impact factor is a product by a very specific company that does it in a certain way. And actually, once a journal receives an impact factor, if they don't like the way that they measure this, they push back on this, and then there's a negotiation. And then even with QS, QS is a product that people buy and people look at, and then there's a negotiation. The reason why HKU wants this is because this allows HKU to position itself, and it can write 4th in Asia, 1st in Hong Kong, compared to Princeton, Stanford, and all of that. So HKU has incentives. We working in HKU have to meet these incentives in order to align ourselves and our research in a way that would allow HKU to compete with the other places in the world. And this is before we even talked about like the funders and the journals and all these big systemic, but this is all to say, to get you thinking about, when we measure things, what are we incentivizing? And sometimes what we're incentivizing does not necessarily reflect good open practices. I'll give you one example, because this is my example right now. So I'm up for tenure. There's a good chance that I will not get tenure at HKU for a lot of reasons, because publications, because grants, because all of the different things. But I'm not making this about myself. I'm giving you one little example about why looking at certain factors might not be the right thing. It might not be fair, and it might not incentivize open science. So let's say that we have two candidates from you. All of you are the HKU psychology department. All of you get, let's say that you work for the same advisor, and you have the same funding, and you have the same resources, and the same lab, and the same access. In this case, we're talking about 2,000 participants each year. We're getting 400 per semester, and then you have to share this with the rest of the lab, not even. Let's say that 50% of your amazing hypotheses are correct, and then you have comparable research designs, and then you have like real good phenomena that has an effect size of 0.5. We'll talk about what effect sizes are. Don't worry about the number. But this is like a typical medium effect size. Let's say that you have two candidates, two of you. One published 33 statistical significant papers, and one published 21 statistically significant papers. Which one should be hired? Which one should be promoted? What would you say? Sorry, what would HKU say? Which one to hire? Candidate A or candidate B? Candidate A? Candidate B? What info do you need?
What about the first author, last author?
Same.
Okay.
Everything that you're gonna say, I'm gonna say same. Aside from this, the only thing that you know is this, because you have everything that you need to know from here. What is the problem here?
The quantity beats quality.
What do you see here in terms of quality?
We don't see quality.
There's one measure of quality. What is it? the number, which number? 33 versus 21, right? 33 is so much better than 21, right? What are we not looking at? And we, sorry? Same. Same.
So when all other factors are fixed or held, the only factor left that the two candidates differs is number.
Yeah.
So we can only turn to number for our decision.
Let's go to the number. What number is better?
So in this case, there's no doubt I would prefer candidate A.
Okay, so let's look at this.
Okay.
Power, because we don't look at power. In order to achieve the 33 statistically significant papers, per condition, they ran 25 participants. But candidate B said, no, I want better power. I want to know that I'm able to detect this confidently. So if somebody replicates my work, it would be more solid. So they invested more. They put 100 in each condition. There's a price for all these amazing papers based on small samples. This is the price. How does this relate to replicability and quality? So if you look at candidate A, 15% are false positive, 25 of the results can be replicated just because we're looking at power. And I can show you, this comes from this paper, so you can look at this, how they calculated this, but it's very easy to calculate this. There's implication because moving from 25 per condition to 100 per condition increases from 25% replicability to 76, reducing the false positive rate to 6%. But what do we see? We see the number of publications, and we don't take the extra step saying, how did they reach the 30 plus? How did they reach all these amazing things? We don't consider the numbers behind it. But these, to me, as an open science advocate, this is what matters. I want big samples. I want everything open. I want everything done well. I want people to show me a power analysis that they've done things in order to make sure that the false positive rate is controlled and replicability is high. So all things considered, if we fixed everything and we only look at the number of publications, we don't think, how did they achieve these publications? And in order to get these 33 statistically significant, giving these resources, they would have to do some things in the back in order to get these 33 amazing, significant papers. Lots of problems with impact factors. I'm not going to go into this, but if you want an amazing presentation to understand all the issues with impact factors and why we should not compare people based on impact factors, go to this talk. James Heathers is considered to be a data thug. He does a lot of looking at people's information and trying to see if there are any problems in them. So he has exposed a lot of fraudsters. I'll just tell you one thing. What is an impact factor for a journal? It's an impact factor of a journal. You submit it to that journal, that says nothing about how many citations you're going to have because there's a big skew. Usually the way that journals have their high impact factors is that there's a few, very, very few big papers that get thousands of citations, and then most of them get 0 and 1. Comparing this based on, all these outliers is a very, very bad way of measuring people. It's also a bad way of measuring journals, but it says nothing about the individual. It makes absolutely no sense to measure an individual based on the journal impact factor. Now we have another big issue. Just so I remember, until when do we have the? What?
520.
Sorry. Until 520. Okay. Yeah. Good. So here's another challenge, and to me, I've been trying to fight this for a long time now. In the last 2 years, I've committed to making this my priority, which is a good reason why not to promote me at HKU. But I want you to understand how problematic this problem is. So here's a case study that just happened right now, a year ago, with Nature.
Hey, Christopher. Yeah, boss. What's up? What do you think about making some of our articles open access? That's a good idea. Make the articles free to the public so that anybody can appreciate the latest scientific advancements. I like it. Of course, the author would have to pay some kind of publishing fee. Yeah, okay, that's reasonable. What, like a couple $100? Yeah, I was thinking maybe $11,000. What? Yeah, $11,000, and we put your article on our website for anybody to read. Why so much? Oh, you know, all the costs. What costs? Reviewing the article? Yeah, we don't pay reviewers. We guilt them into it because it's good for science. Okay, what about formatting? Your 12-year-old niece does that for us. Well, we gotta publish it. That costs money. It's a PDF on a website. Kaylee does it in like 2 seconds. Kaylee? Your niece. Oh, yeah. Besides, who's gonna be able to afford this? Oh, people will pay. Why? Because they have to. What do you mean? Researchers have to publish in order to keep their jobs or get promoted, and we're one of the most prestigious journals around. People will pay. So it's extortion. Here at Nature, we're doing crime. Oh, Christopher, don't be so dramatic. So let me get this straight. You want to charge researchers $11,000 to publish an open access article, thereby ensuring that only researchers with the most money get to publish an article, which defeats the purpose of having open access articles in the first place. Yeah, that's right. And this is guaranteed to be profitable because researchers' livelihoods are dependent on a predatory system that values publishing in high-impact journals. Hey, you got it. This, of course, is insane. It's academics, baby.
Yeah, it would be funny if it's not so sad that this is our reality. Okay, yeah, so this is my reality. If you become academics, this will be your reality. But to publish in all these high impact journals, you need more than just an amazing publication, amazing results, novelty, p-value lower than 0.05. What do you also need? A lot of money, right? And not all of us have this. So you need to come from a very rich lab or a very rich university. If you didn't come from all of that, how are you going to afford all of these fees? Hey. So things are changing. Europeans are leading the change. Some people like me think this is not the right kind of change or the things that we need to do, but some change is happening. And for example, the Biden administration in 2022 decided if we pay, the NIH pays for research, we must make it open access, and you can do this immediately. We don't even need to pay the publishers. We need to immediately force everybody to use our journals. So for example, once they decided this kind of thing, then of course immediately nature human behavior started to play that system. So I'll just give you an example. I think it's very important because this is from HKU. So nature human behavior, some of them are my colleagues, are your professors, and promoting computational psychiatry in China. Something that needs to be read by everybody. If you want to read this and you're not at HKU and you just want to access this, how much do you need to pay? $32. If you want to do open access, what do? You pay tens of thousands of dollars. So here, I think there's another one, follow up to this.
Hey, boss, I got a... Are you okay? Yes, Christopher. Why do you ask? You're ripping out pages of a journal. Yeah, because it's worthless, Christopher. Okay, what's going on? The government has decided that we can't make people pay for research that was funded by the government. That's a bad thing? Yes, the entire academic publishing business model is making taxpayers pay for things they've already paid for. But that's so unnecessary that there's no reason for that business model to exist. Of course it's unnecessary. Look, you don't get on the cover of Middleman Monthly by being necessary. What are my fellow middlemen gonna say when they hear I've been cut out? I don't know. That's the #1 rule of being a middleman. You don't get cut out. I'm so sorry. I don't think you mean that. No, I don't. We've been gatekeeping academic research for far too long. Things need to change. Oh, don't be dramatic. We don't gatekeep research. Yes, we do. You even named the company softball team the Gatekeepers. Well, if we can't profit off of publicly funded research, how are us lowly publishers supposed to make ends meet, Christopher? We make billions of dollars every year. I think we'll be okay. Yeah, for now. Within 5 years, our profit margins could go as low as Google. You know, this is a good thing for society. It gives the public more access to the latest scientific advancements. Well, I hope the public enjoys their free randomized controlled trials. Because I am about to create open access fees that are so egregious. It'll make United Healthcare blush.
And they really did this. Some of them tripled their open access fees. Because of the way that publishers are behaving, now there's a mass resignation, especially people in the open science community. There's a mass resignation in order to us to form our own journals. But what happens when we form our own journals and publish there? It doesn't have impact factor. So we don't get promoted. So we can't get PhD students into the job market. So there's a big vicious cycle here that we can't get out of. That's really creating, so they're really, I consider them to be parasites. The for-profit publishers are parasites. You as a taxpayers pay my salary, you pay my grants, you pay everything that I do, and then I go and I peer review together with my colleagues for free to these for-profit publishers, and then they take everything and they put it behind a paywall so that you need to pay in order to access this. It's unbelievable that we created this system, and it's unbelievable that we're playing with this. We need to change this at the beginning, but why? Why are we not changing? Because impact factors, because we need a fair way to compare people. Fair is what happened when people have got impact factors 200 years ago, created a journal. Now people are submitting their, the top most amazing novel things to and then they have some outliers that have high impact, therefore they are going to keep charging these things and preventing you access. It's unbelievable. When I first understood the system to the core, I just didn't know what to do with this. And I've decided I'm not going to play this game. Don't care about science and nature. I also think that they're not doing good research. They're very low on open science. I try to avoid this system. And there's a price to pay for this. So as you can see, this is the latest reaction. Not too long ago, editors quit so this is from 2023. Some of them I know. Editors quit the top neuroscience journal to protest again open. And this just keeps happening. And we keep playing into it. Even the not-for-profit. So the session I just came out with open access was sponsored by eLife, which is great because it's not for profit. They're not the same as Springer Nature. They're not the same as Elsevier, but still 2,000 to publish with them. I don't understand this kind of reaction. In addition, one of the biggest things that I just don't understand about the way that we do science is that we always say this has been peer-reviewed. Somebody said, what happened in the peer review? Can I see? How did they react? Who said what and what was the reaction? Can we see in order to see whether this is trustworthy or not? Great, nature, science, they do maybe more rigorous stuff. Can I see? No, we can't access any of the peer review because none of it is open. Then how can we evaluate science? How can we make sure it's objective? It's very troubling to me. And actually, I've asked a few times, I want to share everything that's done, open peer review of my articles. I submitted this, unfortunately, to all these bad journals, for-profit journals. I want to open things. I want to share the peer review. And the journal said, if you do this, we sue you because we have IP on this. We did not get the permission from the reviewers. I just don't understand this. How are people going to evaluate my work? How can I evaluate others? You see the published papers, but you don't know how they got there. How many revisions? What did they address? Are there still issues? Unbelievable. This is not science. And the entire academic system works on this. Chris Chambers is a name that I'm going to use a lot. He is the person who started the concept of registered reports. And he is one of the advocates for open science and for changing the publication system and changing the way that we do science. He came out with a book in 2015. If you want, there's a copy in my room. I'm happy to give it to you. 7 deadly sins of psychology. Now we know it's not psychology. Now we know that this is 7 deadly sins of science. And I'm a judgment decision making scholar, so I know we've replicated here in HKU with the students outcome bias, confirmation bias, hindsight bias. These are very, very strong, consistent effects. When people see the results, if they can ensure that they are amazing and novel and p-value lower than 0.05, they adjust back their evaluation. If it's p-value lower than 0.05, good research. If it's higher than 0.05, oh, you did something wrong. This is not good research. And this is outcome bias. You adjust after you've seen so registered reports say, don't show outcomes. Submit only the plan. And then whatever comes after that, this will be published. Publication bias is also one of the great deadly sins. So we'll talk a little bit about that. If we consider the life cycle that you all need to go through in order to publish your papers. So it starts from generating the hypothesis, going to design a study, collecting the data, analyzing it, interpreting this, and then publishing this. Now we know, this is a slide from Monafo and Chris Chambers, is that we have a problem. We have scientific meta-evidence showing us that there's a problem in each one of these steps. Because if you look at this, we have a lack of replication. I'm not talking about a successful replication. How many of the papers that you've read or seen in the literature have ever been subjected to a replication? So in 2012 came the first paper that actually tried to measure this. 1 in 1,000 ever saw a replication. Since then, we've been measuring this in many different domains, not just in psychology. The rate is something between 0.2 to 5%. It's unbelievable. So we don't actually know if something replicated. Something was published in the 1970s in some Stanford sample with 10 participants. How do we know that this generalizes? We don't do replications. Then we have low statistical power, just like we saw with the 2 candidates. It's a big problem. And then we have selective reporting. We're going to talk about questionable research practices, all of this happening. And then everything is positive. Everything is p-value lower than 0.05 in the literature. We don't see any null findings. How can this be? This is a publication bias that does not represent the reality. We know that all of this is wrong. If you see vaccination literature, everything worked. Do you take it for granted? Yeah, of course. All the vaccinations work. Everything that is published always worked in whatever context. It can't be just by the reality, the noise in reality. Yes, please.
I think we have to treat this problem more clearly. So basically, there's an contradiction. The one side is that the research process itself is driven by curiosity in scientific way. But on the other hand, if you want to find a job in an institution, then it's a business. Yeah, the business wants to profit. Yeah, that's a contradiction. And as for Forrest said, the scientific research process, some philosophers has treated just as how to say evolutionary patterns for different generation. It's just defined about a group of people how to do such kind of research. Itself may be problematic, but maybe it's right, because somehow such kind of process can help us to drive our problem and lead us to a conclusion. But such a loop has also combined with or said business process. So this combination itself has somehow changed this the research process.
For sure.
Yeah. So that's I think is the most problem point. And to be honest, my supervisor when I was a master student told me that if you want to do some kind of pure research, you'd better not get step into the university after work. Yes.
So I think it's a good comment, because I would like for us to be able to be in a university that even has some business side initiatives and still be able to do good research. I don't want us to be cynical about being, I don't want us to think that if we're at a university, we sacrificed good science. I really think that we should be able to do good science in a university. I'm going to talk about today most of the issues, but throughout the course, we're going to talk a lot about a lot of the solutions. So I don't want you to be pessimistic about this because I am going to offer you solutions, but we do need to understand what the problems are before we address the solutions. But I really don't want us to become a little bit like your supervisor, your advisor. I don't want us to become cynical about us. In order for us to be here, we have to sacrifice something about our integrity, or that what we do is perhaps worse than what would happen if we had no affiliation. We do good things in the university. There is a process that makes sense, but we can do them so much better. And I will show you how. But we do have to understand what the issues are. Okay, so just bear with me. But it's very important that you think about what you talk about with your advisor and how it relates to some of these issues, and what are the weaknesses and what is it that you want to be able to address. Okay, and any other comments? Good comment. And anything else like this, please?
I just wanted to point out how the $39 cost to download the article, you also have the option to rent it for like $2. So it's not like you have to pay $40 in order to see that. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, that's a good comment. So not always is this completely blocked from the public. Many times, if you use Google Scholar or some other Russian websites, you'll be able to access all sorts of things that are blocked from you if you're not part of a university.
It's actually on the journal.
Yeah, for sure. There are ways, but then you want to really consider why is it that so for us $2 perhaps doesn't seem like much, I don't know, but there's some people who for them this is a real barrier, and it's not needed. There's nothing there that's necessitates this. It has no added value whatsoever because you already paid for it. We as a community paid for it. But we can discuss like how high the costs are. Is this reasonable or not? Because there's many people who would say, even here at HKU, completely reasonable. If we pay $10,000 to Nature, Human Behavior, to publish, we get promotion, HKU gets QS rankings, we get our impact factors, all is well. Perhaps for your specific perspective, but there are all sorts of other challenges, and we'll talk about many of those. Okay, very, very briefly, the case study that started everything in social psychology and why I became interested in this whole thing. So during 2011, I was doing my PhD. I did not hear about this because I was in management, but this happened in social psychology. Have you heard of BEM 2011? How many of you heard of this? Not many? Okay. So BEM in 2011, BEM is a very serious social psychologist that is one of the people who is on the book of Introduction to Social Psychology. I think is the third author, from Cornell, very high prestigious university in the US. This is the paper, Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, Feeling Your Future. He showed with 9 experiments that people react to stimuli that will happen in the future. For example, in one of the experiments, typically when we want to elicit strong emotional reactions, so he measured heartbeat and sweat and a bunch of other things. Usually what you do is you present stimuli. The strongest stimuli that you can present to people turns out is erotic stimuli, pornographic stimuli. And what he was trying to show that actually, if you present pornographic materials, people will react, start to sweat, heartbeat, and all that. But he was trying to show that actually people start sweating and reacting when it happens 1 second, in a few milliseconds into the future. So people already can anticipate that the next random image is going to be pornographic, which is completely against every understanding that we have of physics. We had a lot of experiments in the physics world about whether we're able to predict things in the future. But he showed 9 experiments published in one of our top journals in social psychology journal. We all looked at this and we didn't know what to make of it. Because 9 experiments, statistically significant, lower than 0.05, 8 of them, I think, more than 1,000 participants, showing support that people are able to feel the future. And this caused a real commotion in the social psychology world, and then started, wait, this cannot be. Like, how is it possible? Maybe it's fraud. Maybe he fabricated all this. So what do? You ask, can we please see? And he shared. We looked at this, we didn't see any indication for fraud. And then we realized that maybe using our best practices at the time, 2011, if we analyze things a certain way, perhaps we can almost guarantee that things are going to turn out significant if we do certain things. In this specific case, what happened is that he did optional stopping. What is optional stopping? You bring somebody to the lab, you run the experiments, and then you put it into your Jamovi, SPSS, whatever, and then you run the statistical test. Significant, not significant. Oh, not significant. Next participant, you peak, run this again, significant, not, oh, not. Next participant, and then you stop when you get to lower than 0.05. And the reason why this is problematic is because there's something called the dance of the p-values, which I will show you. And at some point, something is going to come out as significant. So what do? First, you try to replicate this. And we try to replicate this many times. If you want, Stuart Ritchie now is a science communicator, has an amazing newsletter that you can register to, but also came out with a book 2 or 3 years ago called Science Fictions, about him trying to publish this in JPSP, and JPSP saying, we don't want to become the journal of BEM replications, so reject. And then it took a very strong community reaction for this team to be able to publish this in JPSP, but the original article is still there, because this is a lesson for all of us about how messed up things can be. That somebody has a paper in social psychology about predicting the future, still in the literature. How can it be? Just an example of something that was published about an association where eating chocolates gets you to lose weight. This is a real study based on real research, and the media loved it. You know, it was published everywhere. Huffington Post, people were like, it's amazing. So finally, I know how to lose weight. All I need to do is just eat a lot of chocolate. And then came out this in 2015. It's a blog post by the person who actually did this. So here's a dirty little science secret. If you measure a large number of things about a small number of people, you're almost guaranteed to get a statistically significant result. So he had 18 different measures. He didn't say we failed to find 17 and we only find 1 out of the 18. He said we found chocolate. If you plot a correlation matrix with 18 different things, one of them might come out significant, perhaps even more than that. In addition to this, only measured 15 people, so a lot of noise. The less people that you have, the more noise, so it can really bounce up and down. And then in addition, what they did is that one subject was dropped. So you can say, oh, I remember this subject. They weren't feeling very well, therefore I'm going to exclude them. So now we have a name for this. It's called questionable research practices, but many people who publish, especially back then in 2011, in some places, especially in management, this still happens, a lot of massaging of the data. You don't say which things you measured, how many outliers and why you decided, and there's no pre-registration plan, so you can do basically whatever you want. How do we know that people are doing this? Because they're all BEM, and a lot of people are very prominent in psychology. This is the advice that they give to PhD students, that they should do this kind of thing, that they should do what is now called questionable research practices or p-hacking. Not only in 2011, but even somebody from Harvard University, point of view, tell me a story, as if science is a story. So in presenting your result, you have to tell the truth and nothing but the truth. Sounds much better than BEM. But what you don't have to do is tell the whole truth. You can just say, I just found the chocolate, I didn't find the other 17. This is a big problem. And then somebody, because this is eLife and it has open peer review, good, it says, selective reporting strongly biases our understanding of the way the universe works and borders on scientific misconduct. This is not the kind of advice that you need. There's another case study, priming. Here's actually based in Hong Kong, Robert Wire, retired already, Amiratos, 1979, cited by 2,500. Priming, you've probably heard about priming, right? Very strong literature, thousands of citations, unscramble sentences, do a bunch of stuff. There's two kinds of primings. There's the cognitive psychology priming, and there's what's called the social psychology priming. And here, the concept is social psychology priming, in which you unscramble sentences about all kinds of words relating to hostility, and then see that this effect has a big effect on the outcome. The problem is, even with the help of Bob Wire, when we ran this mass replication project with all these people involved, really thinking, because there's so many citations, this has been published many times and done many times since 1979, we're going to find this. But to our great surprise, this is what we find. Although confidence intervals for one outcome excluded 0, these results suggest that the currently used methods do not produce a priming effect. Now, we didn't really need to do all this mass replication effort. Why? Because if we really looked, which is what you're going to do in your RR assessments, if we would really look at what the effect sizes were and the statistics were in the article, we would immediately know that we have a problem. So I'll just give you an example. On the left here, this one here, all this is a meta-analysis. So if you look at the meta-analysis, you see the number of participants. Obviously, you can see it's not very high degrees of freedom, but then you can see over here a Cohen's d of 5.6. 5.6. So what does a 5.6 look like? It's a little bit like somebody tries to make it look like Shaquille O'Neal back from the NBA days in the 1990s compared to the average female. It's that big. It's a very, very big effect. It's an unreasonable effect. It's an impossible effect. And this is what they found in 1979. Nobody can do this. Another problem in the meta-analysis, since we're talking about this, staple n, staple n, staple n, staple n. In 2011, one other thing that happened aside from them is that Diederik Stapel, the dean of Tilburg University Psychology, admitted to having falsified by hand dozens of articles. So the entire literature on priming includes impossible effect sizes and a lot of fraud, right? So we have this problem here. In addition, if you look at the figures, this looks like a great figure, right? No problem with this figure. It's this kind of stuff that will get you into Nature and Science, into the top journals. The problem is, it's an impossible figure. We need to know to ask questions when we read this, in not saying, oh, okay, it's published in JPSP, no problem. We need to know, this looks too good to be true. Why? Because if you have a very, very small sample, you have a lot of noise, nothing looks like that. And in addition, when you have things like four-way interaction, I barely know how to process two-way interaction. So a four-way interaction leading to something and then having just barely significant, lower than 0.05, we should have known that there are issues here. And when we ask Bob Wire, Robert Barr, what is going on here? He says, yeah, it could be that this is a mistake. I don't know what happened. It was a long time ago. So I know Bob, he was in the business school where I was at. He was at the marketing department with his wife. Serious, amazing, friendly person. I don't think this was fraud, but I think there was a lot of pressure back at the time to do questionable research practices that may have resulted in this. We don't know what produced this kind of thing. When we do a replication, you see the original effect is over here. All the replications are here. Some of them in the right direction, some of them in the wrong direction. Most of them are on the null. So we're going to talk about that. So some people said, you didn't do this very well because you should have consulted more closely with the people who do priming literature because you did this on your own and you don't know how to do priming literature. So the poor guy did this again. He ran another multi-site collaboration, the second one on priming. This time, not only doing the original replication, but also asking the priming literature, can you tell us what to change? We'll work with you. Tell us what to do, we'll do this. And then what is the conclusion? In both the close replication and the conceptual replication, we're not significantly different from 0. Despite our best efforts to produce favorable conditions for the effect to emerge, we did not detect a hostile priming effect. Can you imagine the waste? So many people involved in this, millions of dollars invested in this, not to mention all the people that have tried almost every year. There's a student that reaches out to me, or I see a presentation saying, we're going to do priming research. Priming research, this is what I'm going to do my thesis about. I'm like, wait, I know that it looks convincing in the literature. Let me tell you, stay away from social priming. This is not a good thing for you to build your research on, because replications. But most people don't see this. They see the 2,500 citations from the one from 1979. So we have a lot of failures. So you can go and see all the failures for commitment, intelligence, death priming, a bunch of other things that just don't replicate. You can just mass replications. Each one of those is like dozens of people in the open science community coming together. And it's amazing because really we could have done better. I'm not going to go into this. We'll come back to this a little bit later, but I bring Kahneman here, the Nobel Prize winning psychologist in economics, just to say that even Kahneman fell into this trap. Even Kahneman has a chapter in Thinking Fast and Slow saying that priming literature, it seems like the future. So even he fell into the trap of the priming literature. And this is really ironic. He wrote this in a blog. There's a special irony in my mistake, because the first paper that I ever published with Tversky that led to the Nobel Prize was to go to people's statistician conferences and show that even statisticians don't understand this problem of small samples. And even I, who told the world about this, failed to internalize this. So yeah, first paper that he ever did, the law of small numbers, which allows researchers to trust the results of underpowered studies with unreasonable small samples. So our articles was published in 1971, but I failed to internalize its message. So if the father of judgment decision making, who alerted the world about the problem, fell into this trap, of course we're all going to fall into this trap as well. But we need to be very, very careful about this. This is the paper that he published, and the example that he gave over here, which we replicated last year with a thesis student, looks exactly like a typical priming study. So it's amazing that he fell into the trap that he actually told the world. So how are we doing? Not very good, because people are still publishing books about priming. John Barge, as if nothing has happened. Watch this video at some point if you want about how we are with interviewers. The last thing I'm going to do, last 5 minutes, I'm going to show you p-hacking, because I want to make it clear what it is that we're doing when we're doing p-hacking and why this is so devastating. So I have 4 examples. We only have time for one, and I'll do this very, very quickly. Hopefully you'll be able to follow this. R has an amazing thing where you can have a Shiny app. So you can very quickly create amazing tools for anybody that doesn't know or understand statistics to have this kind of interface. What we're going to do is that we're going to simulate a study that we're running, and we want to publish this in Science and Nature. Okay, we want to achieve the high impact factors. We want to achieve getting a job and getting promotion. So we're going to type in our favorite effect, and this, for example, priming. How many participants in each group? We're just going to keep this as it is in priming, like 20 per. True effect is Cohen's d of 0. So that means whatever we're seeing here is noise, random noise, should not have any effect in it. So we're simulating something that has a true effect of 0. Let's have a lot of DVs. I'm going to add this to the maximum. Just have a bunch of them in there. I'm going to put some seed into it, and I'm going to run an experiment. Yeah. So here what you can see is that we have a bunch of DVs. Already DV number 7 looks very, very promising, because DV number 7 looks very close to a p value lower than 0.05. So maybe like it's a chocolate study. What I can do is that I can look at this carefully. So for example, he already gave me DV number 7, and I see this plot over here, but I remember this participant. This participant was sick that day. So I'm going to take this participant out, and then finally I have p-value lower than 0.05. So even though Cohen's d is supposed to be 0, I found support. Now I can stop this. I can send this to Science and Nature, and then I can publish convincingly. So this is one of the things that you can do. But let's say that we are not this cynical. Let's say that we're a little bit like BEM. We're really thinking that what we're doing makes sense. So now we can do something called p-hacking, questionable research practices. What I'm going to show you is a little bit like what we understood that Ben was doing. We're going to do optional stopping, and I want to show you the dance of the p-values and why this p-value lower than 0.05 is so problematic. And we need to be very, very careful about this. So you can see we have the 10 DVs. I want you to pay attention to these p-values over here. As I add participants, I'm going to add 10 participants, add 10 participants. Just look what happens to the p-value, okay? I'm going to add 10, disappeared, no longer, DV number 7, not even close to this. I'm going to add even more, add more. That doesn't look like much, right? It goes up, it goes down, not sure what's going to happen. Now this one gets a little bit closer to that, 0.08, so maybe that's promising. We never know. We're going to add 10 more. Now it's getting really close to 0.05. Oh, disappear. Okay, we'll keep going. Add another 10. This one starts to get a little bit close, DV number 9. Going to add one more. Ta-da! Just because I keep adding participants, it goes up and down, and then I can publish this. I didn't take out any outliers. I didn't do anything. I just added participant and I picked, analyzed, picked, analyzed, picked, analyzed. That's what I did. But let's say that science and nature doesn't care about one DV. It wants 2 DVs. Like, can I get 2 DVs with this? Let's try. Shall we add some more? Let's add some more. I'm adding 10 participants. It's now even more significant. So it's amazing, right? So it's even stronger than before. I'm adding 10 more participants. Ta-da! Suddenly I have 2 DVs, DV number 7, DV number 9. I don't even need to report the rest. And there I have science and nature. You can play with this. You can add all kinds of controls to it for age, gender, interaction, and then see how this, and then it becomes a lot more significant. Maybe we also have like for all of them together, we can do a bunch of things. But I really wanted you to have a quick understanding of what happens here. There's a bunch of other simulations. Go and play with this, just so you understand how sensitive this p-value lower than 0.05 is and how problematic. This we'll do next week and talk about questionable research practices and what happens over there. This is the main summary that I want you to take away from this. Many times when I present these things, people are like, no, but you're wrong. Science is much better than this. Actually, all these problems that you're talking about are not good examples because they have flaws, because this doesn't represent the truth. And I'm completely with you. If you don't find this convincing, that's great. We should have a discussion. We should talk about things, right? What I'm saying is treat this as if we're in a climate change convention and people are talking about energy independence, sustainability, green jobs, livable cities, clean air, clean water. And then somebody comes up and says, but what if this is all a big hoax? Climate change isn't happening and we create a better world for nothing. So I want you to treat this course and open science practices in the same way. So we're talking about all sorts of things that just make science better. So reducing publication bias, preventing p-hacking, increased transparency, performing replication studies, open access for all. And then occasionally somebody comes to me and says, but what if this is all a big hoax, you're wrong, and we create a better science for nothing? So regardless of whether you agree with me or not, take open science as a perspective to just do better science, okay? So my last request to you, go over the syllabus, see that you understand everything. If you have any questions, go on Slack, post this, or come back next week and we'll talk about that, okay? See you next week.